Hey, welcome, jerks. Very exciting last night. Pretty crazy. I couldn't get in my studio last night because we had our rugs cleaned, but I had some unexpected guest hosts running the show last night, and it was a wild night from Canton, Massachusetts. They took over the airwaves. They took over the Young Jurks last night. Rita Lombardi and John Como. I want to thank them, as well as the Canton Select Board for being their usual wimp selves. It was pretty wild last night. If you didn't get a chance to watch it, we're gonna clip a piece of that and post it up probably tomorrow so you can get the short version. But it was a lot of fun last night. Pretty wild. John Como in the chicken suit. Thank you to them. We didn't get whacked either on YouTube, John. I thought that might happen, but we were fine, John. So thank you so much. And John taking off his shirt, he actually raised money. We usually don't like that stuff here, but hey, if you're raising money for us, thank you so much for doing that, John. Some people wanted to see it. And there were some people like me who didn't want to see it, but we didn't kick any money in. It was the ladies that wanted to see it. They kicked extra money in. So it happened again. I want to thank everyone for last night. We got a great show tonight. We got a bunch of shows this week. We got a lot of stuff happening here. Friday night, I believe there's going to be a show. We're going to definitely be covering Karen Reed. We're all getting ready for 1 p.m. on Friday. Turtle Boy just put a major story out that we're definitely going to talk about tonight. Attorney Bederow is in the green room. We'll be bringing him up in a little bit. But we have a great guest right now. First time guest on the show. He's a former Massachusetts State Police for 24 years. He retired in 2011. He's now a security consultant. I've watched him on some other shows. The one I saw him on was Surviving the Survivor. And watching him, I think that was like maybe his first introduction to the Karen Reed stuff. And I think some people were like totally with him on it. And I was just like, you know what? Give him some time. He's open. I don't even know where he's at now on this, but I just liked him on that show. And I thought he did a good job. And I'm excited to hear what he's going to say tonight about the Karen Reed and the Massachusetts State Police and Proctor and Buchanan and all the other Mass State Police. So I'm excited. I also realized too, after I just booked him, that he ran for mayor in Massachusetts too. So definitely going to be an interesting guy to have on the show. Let's bring him up. His name is Todd McGhee. Welcome to the Young Jurks, first time guest, Todd McGhee, and your first time ever on the show that we've had a former Mass State Police on the show. So thank you so much, Todd, for being that guy.
And glad to be here, Mike. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, and tell us about yourself. Like, how did you become at the Mass State Police for 24 years? Tell us your story.
I started my law enforcement career right out of Northeastern University. I literally graduated in June of 1987 and made my way into actually the registry police. Started my law enforcement career with the registry police, and then 1992, a state merger happened, and the registry police, Capitol Police, Metropolitan Police, and the former Department of State Police all formed one new consolidated Department of State Police in 1992. And so that's the full story of how I became to be a Mass State Trooper.
Excellent. And where you ran for mayor too? Is it Attleboro?
I did. I'm a resident of Attleboro. My wife and my family, we live here since 2000, and felt the need to get involved with the politics. I advanced to the final round. There were 3 candidates that were running, to include the incumbent. And in the final voting, I was able to garner 2,300 votes or so. Didn't get the job completely done, but I don't regret it. I had a tremendous opportunity and really got a chance to learn about the concerns of some of our citizens here in Attleboro. So it was a great run. Really had a robust campaign for having to go through it the first time. My wife was my campaign manager. She did a fantastic job of coordinating everything, and we had a great experience.
That's phenomenal. And your security consultant, we have in the chat, we pinned it, 508group.com is your website for that, right?
Yes, with 508 Group, I actually provide training and education for the Department of State Office of Anti-Terrorism Assistance, where they provide training and education to partner nations. I've been to 12 different countries around the world, training and providing counterterrorism training and education, as well as aviation security for the international airports at these partner nations. So I've been to places like Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, Africa 7 different times, to Djibouti, Ethiopia, Senegal. And to shorten the list, I spent in 2022, I spent some time in Erbil, Iraq. And very interesting place, very interesting experience. Dangerous, but if I had to do it, I'd do it all over again.
Wow, international you've gone. And Logan Airport too. I mean, that's the big outpost that you worked as a Mass State Police, right?
My last 10 years of my career. So immediately in the aftermath of 9/11, I was one of 82 troopers that put in for a request of transfer to be reassigned there. That transfer request was approved. And that was, I would have to say, I've got a lot of highlights in my career, but duty at Logan Airport was a fantastic experience. You had to shift from highway patrol mentality to protecting critical infrastructure. And it has opened up the opportunities that I pursue now as a private consultant.
With security, you good at Logan. We're safe now, right? There's not
Yeah.
going to be something like that happen before, hopefully, right?
We got to pay attention. There's some bad actors out there that are always looking to exploit. So, in conjunction with the efforts of TSA, with the Customs and Border Patrol, there's a big presence of law enforcement at Logan, as well as there is at other international airports. But all of those public safety agencies are working together.
Excellent. Now, tell us about the Karen Reed stuff, because there's so much to get into, especially with the Mass State Police. But what's your feeling after this trial, now that you've seen the whole trial? You've seen like kind of a controversy even about the verdict, what actually happened here. What are your feelings about Karen Reed right now, and the whole, her innocence, or do you feel like it wasn't proven? Like, what's your feeling on it?
So, there's so much emotion on both sides of the issue, guilty, not guilty. And I think it's important for your viewers to understand that in our rule of law, we have to look at things objectively. And early on in the case, before we even get to Trooper Proctor, early on in the case, you had a crime scene that was lifted in less than 3 hours. It was lifted before the state police were called in with state police resources, the CERT team, which I wasn't on the CERT team, but I've worked with them in the Molly Bish search out west and in some other cases. And you want them as your search team. They're thorough, they're professional, they're the best of the best. So you have that resource that came onto a crime scene that was no longer sterile. So that's the first issue. The solo cups, collecting blood, the leaf blower, trying to, I don't know what that attempt was. Again, well-intended. I don't want to sling mud against Canton PD, but that's not protocol. The experts come from the Mass State Police in the form of crime scene investigations. That's all they do. They collect evidence, they process evidence, and they know how to maintain a chain of custody. That's basic police work, basic 101. So right from the beginning, there were holes in the investigation from this perspective. Statutorily speaking, the state police are not going to go on a call out for a non-fatal incident. So when John O'Keefe was discovered, they tried to revive him. The EMTs transported him and they tried to revive him. And so when he finally passed, that's when statutorily Kenton police would call the state police. But at that point, the crime scene had been lifted. Most likely those solo cups of blood had been captured and then put into a Stop and Shop bag, a non-sterile container, not tagged, not bagged, not followed by protocol at all. So I give that long-winded opening to say there were holes from the beginning. My gut reaction, despite what you think about Karen Reed, pro, negative, or against, pro, con, objectively, you have to follow the rule of law. And Jackson and Unetti did a remarkable job at punching holes in cross-examination from minute one. So based on that, you had a lot of things that could have created the unreasonable doubt. And keep in mind, in our rule of law, Karen Reed does not have to prove her innocence. You need one juror to find some level of reasonable doubt, and the defense has done their job in that particular format.
Now, the Mass State Police, Proctor, and the other police officers, a couple of them are under investigation, apparently, at Internal Affairs. There's been other scandals recently with the RMV. There's been overtime scandals. There's been judge scandals in the past. There's been a lot of scandals with the Mass State Police specifically, but other police forces too. What's going on? Why do you think there's so many law enforcement corruption issues happening lately in the media headlines, at least?
You know, Mike, I there's a part of me that says for the wrongdoers, then they get what's coming to them, and the remainder of the department shouldn't have to feel their pain. That's unrealistic, and I realize that that's an unrealistic perspective based on how frequent my former agency has been in the news. Could be an issue with oversight. Could be an issue with the lack of accountability. You know, these are internal issues. They have to get them under control. You know, the biggest scandal was the Turnpike scandal because it involved over 40 troopers. You had fraudulent timesheets put in. You had false citations that were being issued. Just really bad misconduct, corrupt. You might as well call it what it is. And then you move to, you know, the RMV scandal with the CDL licensing. Again, another scandal that made mainstream headlines. You had injuries at the State Police Academy from drill instructors that had recruits on hot pavement and doing what they call bear crawls during fitness exercises, and they got first or second degree burns on their hands. So again, poor judgment, without a doubt. We have to do better. You've got to be able to be transparent. I believe the governor is in the process of hiring. Colonel Mon is an interim colonel, and I believe you're probably going to see for the first time an external candidate make their way to the superintendent's office.
Do you think that's helpful? Because this is coming up in Canton too with their police chief. Do you think with a lot of scandals in your police force that outside chief or colonel for the state police would be a good idea?
I'll tell you this, and I'll give you the example of what happened with racial profiling in the state of New Jersey. State of New Jersey went through lawsuits, and they also went under a consent decree where there was oversight over the agency. The ripple effect changed the citation codes across the country. So as bad as this is, I would rather see a new superintendent. If the decision is an outside personality, that's fine. But better to have new leadership than to have to go through some type of federal oversight due to a consent decree. So it could be a lot worse.
And do you think that could be possible here in Massachusetts? That's actually something I think Attorney Bederow brought up too. So you're the second, very serious person with experience bringing that up. And Bederow's in the green room. We're going to bring him up in a second. What do you think that's possible? That would happen to the Mass State Police?
I think a connector that could make that a reality is what happens from that federal investigation. That information has been held very, very tight. Attorney Jackson brought in the forensic experts on the collision experts, and then of course we discovered the text messages from Trooper Proctor as a result of that investigation. So a lot more there. There's probably more behind the scenes, I would imagine. But at this moment in time, hopefully the state police would do its due diligence, get out in front of these different issues that have come to light, and hopefully avoid something more serious like being entered into a consent decree.
Let's hope so. I mean, that would. I mean, if they don't, though, I mean, that's the problem. Seems like there's not much change happening, even with all the scandals.
Yeah, the oversight's going to be key, and then from there, you're going to have internal audits from accountability on timesheets. I mean, every cruiser, I'm told, every cruiser now has a GPS system attached to it, a tracking system as a result of the Turnpike scandal. So, again, internal efforts being made there, but if it's deemed not enough, you could see something a lot more serious be implemented.
Jeez, I think about how long ago I used to be a Teamster helper, delivering the beer, and through college, basically. They had GPS back then. You know, I'm old now. So, I mean, that was a long time ago. And they tracked our trucks. I remember the days when they would actually say, hey, bring that truck in. We're going to put a GPS on it, because it was like the first, you know, like a new thing that they were doing back then.
Yeah, and it worked.
Yeah. I'm just surprised it took so long on the police cars.
Law enforcement's, whether it's intended or not, is always moves the slowest with any type of new technology. And in this particular case, they had a need to implement it. So
Absolutely. Let's bring up Attorney Bederow. I mentioned him a few times. It's his time to come up. Attorney Bederow, how you doing tonight?
How are you, Todd? Nice to see you again. How are you?
good to see you again, my friend.
How you been?
Good yourself?
Good.
And you guys have been on shows together. I know, like Surviving the Survivor, right?
Yeah. Something else too. I don't know if it was another one of those or something else. I can't remember, but a couple times.
Yep, a couple times. Could have been Canton Confidential as well.
Excellent. Which is the NBC. I think they're going live on Friday night with another one of those. I can't wait to check that out, because what's her name? Oh my God, I'm forgetting her name, and I love her. Sue. Thank you. Sue. Yeah, Sue O'Connell. I've been following her for years, but she is requested to speak to people who are supporters of John O'Keefe. So I'm interested to see who gets on television for Friday. It's going to be wild to see who actually gets on camera.
That's kind of a strange way to phrase it. I mean, isn't everyone a supporter of John O'Keefe? I don't know. Doesn't that strike? I mean, no one's anti John O'Keefe. There may be, I mean, it's kind of like you're pro or anti Karen Reed, right?
Yeah, I think that basically opens it up to everybody.
Yeah, I mean, he's a good man. He's dead. Who's in favor of that? Nobody.
Right.
Yeah. But let's talk about what's going on, because it's just breaking news right now that Turtle Boy has reported this scandal. It looks like with a state police guy who came and raided Turtle Boy, actually, and he also was the person that was in charge of like the jury security and doing the background checks. And apparently, this Fanning guy. Have you read this latest Turtle Boy story?
I haven't.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, yes.
Attorney Bederow has. What do you think about it?
It's disturbing. I mean, it's allegations at this point. There's probably a lot more that has to be developed before you draw any real hard conclusions. But, you know, the idea that a high-ranking supervisor from the state police, specifically from the Norfolk County Homicide Group, specifically who supervises all of the usual characters that are witnesses in this case, specifically who is on the witness list himself, and specifically who, if my memory is right, was a recipient of some of these Proctor texts.
Yes, he was.
So he's involved in the case in a general sense. It doesn't mean he has to be a witness or has any real information, but he's tethered to this case, which would tell you, I think anyone with a brain who understands any conflicts of interest or anything would tell you that he should have absolutely nothing to do with anything involving being within 100 yards of the jurors unless it's on the witness stand as a witness under oath. So if it's true that he was somehow involved in background checks and knows all the personal information, nobody wants to assume that a law enforcement guy is doing anything nefarious. I understand that's not always the case, but nobody wants to assume that. But why anyone from that unit in that DA's office would be in charge of that strikes me as wrong. But then having him involved in the security detail at the courthouse or whatever doesn't make any sense, because it's just putting everyone in a bad situation. And something that I think Todd said earlier, you know, the whole organization suffers for the conduct of a few, and that agency is under such attack. that anything that went bad with jurors, and there's, these guys are hanging around, they're going to potentially get blamed for it. But this is worse. I mean, these are allegations that he was somehow reporting that a juror who, on the opinion of some, was probably would have favored the defense. Now that's opinion, obviously. Nobody knows whether that's true or not, but whatever. People in the courtroom saw her reactions. It was reported how she reacted. That somehow, she was reported to the judge and somehow removed for reasons which, we may not fully know, but the allegations are whatever they are. And that's disturbing if a state police employee who's connected in the way that we already talked about was involved in that. And why? And again, I don't know what the sources are, where it comes from, but why would any state trooper be reporting anything to the judge in that way? I mean, it ought to be reported to the lawyers, and the lawyers ought to huddle with the judge, and then you figure out what it is. And then there's just the allegation itself. How do they know? How does the state police know? Are they told, or are they following people? I mean, are they following jurors? So this is disturbing. And the other nugget that I thought was interesting from the story was, and I didn't know this, but all of the and I don't want to get into conspiracies about probabilities and numbers and how jurors get removed, but statistically, if all the jurors who were not selected were the jurors who were reporting about the one juror who was dismissed the day the video went out, and I was there that day, so I actually witnessed all of this, so I know exactly who went up, how many times they went up, and to some extent, not as much as the people involved in the case, what was going on. And there were multiple jurors who were brought up and asked questions about the one juror who was removed at that time. And I believe including the juror that's the subject of Aiden's story, the one who got removed. So, and then they all apparently got removed right before deliberations. Why is that? I don't know. But the problem with the public's perception of this case is there's a hell of a lot of coincidences. And whether you believe in coincidences or not, there's a lot here that just don't seem to make a lot of sense. So it's very disturbing allegations, but I think there's a lot more to the story that has to be learned before any full conclusions be drawn.
Yeah.
Fanning's name came up a couple of weeks ago when the suspension of Tully and Buchanan came in, but right. I believe the state police exonerated his investigation for whatever that layer was. This sounds like it's something new.
I thought they, and I could be wrong, I thought they unsubstantiated as opposed to exonerated. I thought they gave him kind of the hold your nose and we can't tell one way or the other. I mean, he's clear.
They did. It was the weirdest thing. It was like,
that's different. That is a lesser, it's unfounded, who knows, but it's not a, you proved your innocence kind of thing. And burdens of proof are different administratively. It's not a criminal trial, right. So, but I mean, he did get cleared in a legal sense, but what's going on with, the other guys, there's still two that are highly, in the soup, as they say. And those are very important witnesses in two open cases in Norfolk County, not one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it could get a lot worse too with this whole, Fanning thing. Cause now, I mean, it's crazy because like so many in the community were saying like they thought this, a lot of people kind of the rumor mill, and we were playing it safer because we need documentation. But like, if you have Turtle Boy on you, he's going to find out. Like, that's the way I feel. You can't try any shady shit when he's around. And
are you suggesting he's doing journalism?
There you go. And it's like just a matter of time. This is what I love about this. Like, because back in the day, I covered stories when I was like the main journalism guy, and it's a lot of stress on you. It's like now I barely do any journalism. I do like a little tiny bit, and he just does it all. The guy is just You don't need anybody else.
Well, look, I think there are details that still have to be fleshed out. I mean, a lot of people, and I don't think this was in the report today, but there's been speculation that somehow that Fanning was in charge of the jury room. And as just a matter of logistics, and all disclaimers apply, I'm going on New York, not Massachusetts, but I don't think this is the kind of thing that would be different. I don't know why the state police, never mind coming from the Norfolk homicide part of it, why would the state police be hanging out with the jurors? As that makes no sense to me. I mean, there's court officers there.
Right.
That's what they do. There are county court officers. Every county has them. Every courthouse has them, and they deal with stuff like that. So I wonder if it relates more to transporting them, security on the street. I don't know, but
I think that's exactly what it is.
Well, that makes sense because outside, as you know,
Because they
circus.
put them in a bus and they did do that. So yeah, I think that's
Well,
exactly
that
what
would
it is.
probably, well,
And
I
he
should
did
say probably.
apparently he did the Corey checks on them too. Remember the background checks?
Well, that would certainly give them access to know who's who, but that's a far cry from doing a background check to, creating a hit job, if you will, on making sure a juror doesn't sit. Now,
that's the weird
what's
part.
interesting about this is if there is still a federal investigation, which there presumably is, although we don't know what they're looking at. If these are credible allegations and there's something there, and there's some degree of evidence that a state trooper in an agency which is already being investigated is somehow involved in rigging a trial in the sense of trying to excuse jurors who are not favorable to what they're trying to do, which I'm not saying is the case. It's been reported, but I don't know. That's the kind of thing that would be top of the list, part of a federal investigation, because if that were true, that would be corruption with a capital C, if that were true.
Absolutely.
I want to ask Attorney Bederow, do you have any questions tonight for Todd tonight? Since this is the first time we've had him on the show. I'm imagining as a prosecutor, you might have some questions for him.
I'd probably have a million questions, but what do you make of the IAB investigations of the other guys? Does that strike you as something that has to be more serious than looking and receiving text messages and laughing, that it would be something deeper for them to announce that, or might it just be something like that?
Mark, I can tell you, let me answer it this way. I can tell you from my time spent in the fire marshal's office that investigations are conducted in a team concept. So when we went to an arson, we went out as representing the state fire marshal's office, along with investigators from the fire department, actual firefighters. And then from there, together, we would jointly try to determine cause and origin of the fire. If we came across a body, we would step aside in unattended death, and then the CPAC unit would come out, and they would be the primary unit that would do the investigation. So the fact that their practice is working as a team, I think they're right in the same bullseye target as Proctor. So we don't know all that was transpired in those text messages. We got a piece from what Attorney Jackson had brought forward, but there's probably a much deeper picture that probably provides extra exposure to both Buchanan and Tully.
Well, that's interesting. And unfortunately, and I, as an alumni of the agency, it must be in some sense depressing to see them, they can't get out of their own way, but,
right.
They seem to have the worst instincts in judgment just in making decisions. And I mean, one of the things that jumps out, and I don't want to get too much into the other case for obvious reasons, but in the Karen Reed case, the Canton police said we have to get out of this right away. Because, whether they did or they didn't, they felt there was a conflict. Okay, you go to the other case, and for obvious reasons, the Norfolk DA said we have to get out of this. We can't be involved because there's just the appearance is obvious, but not the state police. And the state police are the ones investigating that other case. And two of the troopers, actually three of the people are involved in that case. 2 of them are literally victims in that case, and another one is the investigating state police trooper. They're all apparently under various degrees of investigation. One of them is going to be terminated, obviously, within due course, but they knew for months and months that, state troopers were victims in that case, and continued to investigate.
Yeah, how about that? They went to his house and arrested him.
It gets worse. One of the alleged victims of an indicted count is investigating.
Yeah.
Who's ever heard of this? I mean, who has ever heard of
you investigate your own crime, yeah, it's unbelievable.
It is insanity for a number of reasons. One, the public faith and trust in the investigation. But what are you subjecting yourself to in cross-examination for bias and motive and other things? So they just, and every day something new happens with this agency. And it's, the more you dig, the more you learn, the worse it gets. And it's bad. It's going to kill them in the Karen Reed retrial, if there is one. I mean, I don't know, what are they supposed to do with these people, especially if Todd's right. And it's much worse than just a slap on the wrist for liking disgusting text messages.
Yeah, there's probably deeper. Mark, Mike shared earlier that you're also in the realm of thinking a potential consent decree. I brought that up in this in our earlier start of the podcast. What's your thoughts as far as some additional oversight?
I mean, it seems necessary, at least. I mean, if you look at the last several years, I mean, you have this. I mean, take the Karen Reed case. The three of the main state troopers or supervisors are all completely, in the soup. That's unprecedented. I mean, the reality is the likelihood of somebody from the Massachusetts State Police going to prison, whether it be federal or state, is probably higher than Karen Reed, because just probabilities, evidence, and what Todd said earlier. You have the other scandals that you mentioned previously, whether it was the Turnpike thing, and they've had other problems. Everybody knows about what happened in the lab 10 years ago, and how many thousands of cases, I mean, literally thousands of cases were dismissed. You had the what about like cooking the books on overtime scandal going on, timesheets. So it's an agency that's in crisis, and like you said, fair or unfair, if the public has no confidence in the police, then that's just one step from anarchy. But this agency, in its current connotation, appears to need it, because how many different crises do you need before anything changes? And nothing seems to be changing. I mean, you can get into even what the investigators are doing today, knocking on doors, seeking evidence. Nothing seems to be changing. So I'm not sure why it wouldn't happen. I think I did hear some of what you were saying earlier, and I think that if it is going to happen, the driving force is going to be the U.S. attorney for the District of Massachusetts. I mean, that's generally how these things work. The feds come in, they, start a civil action that would be concurrent with potentially criminal action, maybe against certain individuals, and basically force them to agree to some kind of consent decree and be ran temporarily as a federal agency until they demonstrate that they can act like grown-ups.
Mark, I haven't done the math, but it could be as many as the last 5 superintendents in the state police, typically promotes within, have all taken the job as the result of a scandal.
Well, that's about 4 too many. I mean, so before you'd think they would do something, nobody can predict the first one, but if it keeps happening, at what point do you, blow it up?
That history.
Figuratively, of course, people. But how do you not make some serious change, or at least try to? And I mean, the funny is not the right word, but despite all the scandals, I mean, the poster child of the state police corruption is going to be Karen Reed. I mean, the fact that all these people are running around wearing T-shirts that say framed with inverted language and making all of these signs and this and that. And Proctor is, a cover boy.
Proctor's a verb now.
Well, yeah, that's right.
I think it's proctor's
you get
that.
proctored. It's a thing. And the scary thing is, well, from Proctor anyway, and or at least his family advocates, he doesn't seem to have a shred of remorse or think he's done anything wrong. I mean, if you watched his testimony, it was, he was very sheepish. I have to say this, so I'll say that I was upset and ashamed and it was wrong. But if you break down the substance of his testimony, that was ridiculous. The guy's a homicide detective, and he lost his shit 8 months after a hit and run. That made him emotionally that's crazy. That makes no sense. And the only thing that makes you believe is that he probably sent more text messages in other cases and sent them to God knows what, God knows who, and whether he's compromised other cases. And maybe that's part of what's going on, like with him and Buchanan. I don't know. But they're an agency that, at least in its current version, is just a complete disaster that the public has zero confidence in, and rightfully so, at least certain segments of it. I mean, certainly the Norfolk DA branch, if you will, needs to be disbanded and fumigated. I mean, and maybe it should, and maybe they need to reevaluate this entire premise where we literally encamp a unit in the DA's office to be buddy. Because here's the other problem. Okay. Somebody put something online, and these are all public records. Look who's stuffing money into Morrissey's pockets every election cycle. The state troopers that investigate homicides who work in the Norfolk DA's office. And then Morrissey gives press conferences talking about, well, they don't know anything and they're not related. And he may be right, he may be wrong. And we're not talking millions of dollars, but the appearance of corruption and comfort, you can't have this. You can't have all these state troopers and DAs literally who are subjects loyal to the king, giving the king sacrifices every election cycle. That is like corruption 101. That breeds it just, and any other place in America understands that. And we saw this in Brooklyn in the DA's office years ago, and they got killed for this kind of thing. But it's Norfolk County, and anything goes. It's what do they call that? It's like Moscow rules or whatever. Just everything goes. Chinatown. Well, that of course.
That's another one you said. I love that. Massive media. I hit the button a second too early. I didn't mean to. I did it early. I didn't mean to. But Basley, now you're here. I'm glad to get you up. I know you were waiting. You have what's going on? What you got something for Todd too? Because he's a first-time guest tonight. Former Mass State Police. I'm just expecting that you probably have something to say to him tonight too.
Absolutely. So, do you want me to call you Trooper Todd or retired Trooper? What do you prefer?
Todd's good.
Todd's good. Works. Okay, great. So, I was on LTL Media last Thursday, and we were going over every single instance in the last 10 years, major instances, I should say, in the state police where there's been controversies and all that. I never try to put too much pressure when I ask these questions on folks like yourself or legal questions to Attorney Bederow. But do you feel that there's a level when these police officers they're going to eventually getting bagged for these types of things? Do you feel that they almost feel a level of confidence that they feel that they can get away with it, which is why they're always doing things similar to this that might lead them to eventually get bagged down the road? Because in this particular case, when I look at what's gone on in the Karen Reed case, it seems to me that these guys had a great level of confidence. So they could take, red Solo cups and collect taillight with it and all that. I just thought that was, a little bit outrageous. And evidence bags in Sallyport that were open and left unattended to, things like that. It just seems like some of these guys have a level of confidence that they feel like they can get away with it. And then at some point they're eventually bagged. Maybe sometimes it's just the public that reveals that. So I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that kind of stuff.
Great question. My first reaction when all of the text messages started to be exposed was, and not just in the Karen Reed case, this was also evident in the CDL scandal with the driver's licensing, the cavalierness of the language and putting things out in writing, essentially, I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked. I think the mindset was one of arrogance. By you picked the scandal, I think there's a level of arrogance, but there's also going back to the Turnpike, it was groupthink. It was okay. Well, this is what we're doing, so I'm just going to participate. I mean, I don't want to say what scandal was bigger than another one because they're all bad, but the Turnpike had over 40 people involved in that investigation that were all submitting false citations, false timesheets, getting paid for work that they weren't doing. So, it's unfortunate. It is what it is. We have to talk about it and put it out there. And the agency needs a level of accountability. I feel bad for the good men and women within the department that do the right thing every single day, that don't get caught up in these different scandals, but they're going to feel the pain of a few.
What's interesting too, just to go back to the text messages real quick, and I feel like it kind of gets buried in the dramatic, I wish she would kill herself, or calling her all those names, or her physical condition. From a legal standpoint, the most shocking messages in which I believe there was dialogue, and this is not just Proctor sending nasty messages, but there's actual trooper dialogue, was about how are we going to get the medical examiner to do what we want. Okay. And that again is moving towards actual corruption. Whether they thought about it that way or not, they were literally communicating ways to intimidate, bully, maybe that's strong words, but pressure her in some way to reach a conclusion that would support what they wanted to do, without even really focusing on what the actual evidence was or what she was telling them scientifically. And that ought to shock the hell out of people as much as anything else, that these guys are, supposed to be investigating a crime, and they are literally trying to say, well, you need to make this a murder case, and what are you going to do? And they're laughing with each other, saying, you're not tough enough. I forget the exact words. Those would, to me, be the most problematic in terms of, are these professionals, putting aside the locker room awful misogynist stuff, but that's competence and corruption.
Yeah. Mark, I had a friend of mine who was talking about the case, and he said, can't you just chalk it up to locker room talk? I said, when someone is determining if you're going to go to jail for murder or prosecuted, that changes the game, 180-degree direction. Also, the comment about rookie move, that you didn't stick around in the ME's office to get that death determination.
You can't chalk it up to locker room talk, because you have to look at all of the evidence in context and marshal it with what else. I mean, it's not a vacuum where you just look at these text messages. So when you say him saying, nothing's going to happen to that homeowner, I hate this woman, I hope she'd kill herself, and then you say, okay, let's assume it's locker room talk, how did he handle the investigation? I mean, one of the most stunning things that came out of that guy's mouth was he made a very quick determination this was a vehicular homicide. He had never spoken to Karen Reed. He had never seen the car, never done anything. He ordered the tow truck before he left to go down there. I mean, he was taking the truck, warrant be damned, probable cause be damned, evidence be damned, didn't take a picture, which is insane if you saw the taillight the way you did.
He didn't interview anyone in the house.
No, I mean, he did nothing. And if that's not the tunnel vision that supports the text messages about, I need this to be a homicide, don't worry about the homeowner, I hate the woman, when you put it all together, it gets even more devious.
Todd, question for you. Don't you think it's protocol that when the state police tow away a vehicle from, when it's picked up, whether it's in Dighton or any other location, such as a crime scene, don't you think if the state police are currently conducting that investigation, that it would make sense that they would take that vehicle to a state police barracks location or any other location, as opposed to back to the town in which the crime was allegedly perperpetrated?
Especially
100%.
after that police department has supposedly recused themselves, right?
Especially in a
100%.
blizzard. Who wants to drive 30 extra miles on highways in a blizzard?
It's too easy to make accommodations for a vehicle that's coming in based on an investigation. Our unit is the lead agency. We're going to have 100% custody of the vehicle. It's too easy.
But you need, who owns the video, who can manipulate. I mean, I hate to get, again, all conspiratorial, but you go where the evidence goes. If the Canton people are in charge of the video, that's how video ends up getting disclosed 2 years later in the middle of trial, with people operating in and out and inverted and in a way that's not useful. It has no integrity. God knows, it's hiding the taillight, it's hiding Proctor, and remember Buchanan on this. And maybe he's in trouble. Maybe he's in trouble for perjury. I don't know. But his direct examination testimony was very nonchalant. That's accurate. That's what's going on. That's me. That's this. And when he realized what was going on cross, he got real forgetful about who was who and what he said the day before. And that guy's not dumb. Okay. He may be many things in your mind, but he's not dumb. He was a very confident witness on direct. Yeah. If you remember, he was very casual, smiling, leaning on the podium like, I own this place. And he's got real problems at a retrial, because they're going to, they got sandbagged with that video, right? They didn't have much time to really use it. Well, now give these guys 6 months to figure this out and go over this again with the benefit of a sworn transcript from the first trial. And you start to think, how can they possibly use these guys again? And how can they proceed? But they're the only ones who found the taillight, who did all this. And you just sit here. And this is why I say, I don't know how the hell they're going to retry this case. I really don't.
I have a question for Todd that came in from a local town police officer, not from Canton, north of Boston. I'll say that I know. He's questioning, because you criticize the Canton Police Department, but not the CERT or the CPAC or the CPAC. Yeah, CPAC. What's your response to this comment from LT33?
Yeah, thank you, LT33. Let's go back to the original crime scene that was established by Canton Police. Albeit it was in the middle of a snowstorm, very difficult conditions to do anything under. But again, statutorily speaking, the state police can't come out until there's a fatal. Canton Police lifted the crime scene once John O'Keefe was transported. Under 3 hours, the crime scene was lifted, which means the crime scene is no longer sterile. So the CERT team comes in, and if you can remember, the jury asked for notes from the CERT team search, and it wasn't available. Judge Cannoni did not make that evidence available to the jurors while they were in deliberation. So there were some issues there. So again, CERT team, I've worked with them in the past. I'm not a former member of the CERT team, but I've worked with them, and they're professionals. They know what they're doing. They understand searching. So again, the whole thing, starting with the crime scene, is problematic.
Yep. Here's my concern about the CERT team, and assuming that they're on the up and up, which I do. I don't think, the conspiracy, if there is one, that's just too far. And so, but if you accept the fact that somebody might have put some taillight pieces there, they found, okay, they had a timeline. Maybe that happened with Proctor and those people, but they go out there, they're searching at night. They believe it's a car accident, and they find a couple of pieces of taillight. That's a significant discovery, but they also theoretically know at this point that the taillight is missing another 80% of the red stuff that they ought to be finding somewhere. And presumably it's got to be right there. Where they found the other two, if that's your working theory. So it's dark, they leave. How in the hell does nobody say, if we found two pieces, there's got to be a lot more. Why are we not out here the next morning in daylight, digging, searching, as opposed to just saying, we got our two pieces, we're done. And then what do? They leave it to, here they come again, Buchanan and Proctor to say, well, we're going to drive by on the way to work and just every day find a piece. And even on that day, okay, you found another piece. Well, how do you not say right there, let's keep digging? Where's the rest? Oh, every day it'll melt more. I mean, again, how do you know the Alberts aren't going to come out and see them every day digging in their yard and start looking themselves? Wouldn't you be concerned about, like, even though the crime scene was gone immediately, it's still something. It's still, there's evidence there. It may not be a safe crime scene. And you listen to all this about how they did it, and I don't know how anyone with a straight face can credit this as saying, yeah, I believe these guys found all these taillight pieces in the way that they claim, because it's just, it's absurd.
Lieutenant, I think it was Lieutenant Tully that had mentioned, no, I take that back. It was the lieutenant in charge of the CERT team. He said that because it was a residence, the CERT team literally was standing shoulder to shoulder during their search.
Mm-hmm.
That was his testimony.
Yep.
Why weren't more pieces found?
That's a good question.
Which, just to put it all together for everybody, not us, but anybody out there, what we're saying is basically they came up with this conspiracy or cover up on the fly, and they hadn't put their whole story together about what they were going to go with yet. So that's why they kept finding more taillight as they went, because they didn't have their plan together at the point. They kept piecing it together. Well, let's just keep going back. Let's just keep finding more taillight.
I want to ask Todd
what
he actually meant by that, because I think that's a good point. What did you think? Like, I think you kind of were leaning towards something there, Todd. I want you to maybe flesh it out a little more.
I have firsthand working knowledge with the CERT team. They're the best of the best. If you want the CERT team searching for anything, the Mass State Police CERT team is who you want searching. In testimony, the lieutenant in charge of the unit said that because it was only a residential footprint for their search, the troopers that were in the CERT team at the residence were standing shoulder to shoulder during the search, sifting every square inch of that yard. I have a hard time with more pieces of tail lens, plastic lens, not being discovered by the CERT team. I have a very hard time.
So that makes you probably think that evidence was planted, like most likely, like it seems more probable.
It opens up a conversation.
Good.
No question. I mean, and again, I think, you have this from an expert's view, someone who's done this, and you could look at this any number of ways. I think what Todd says is true. Like, how do you not find it? I mean, you're the best of the best, and the argument would be because it wasn't there. Okay, but again, even if you want to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, acting on the up and up, and nobody planted any evidence. So even the best of the best do a search. They only find 2 pieces, but they know that there's a lot more. As professionals, okay, knowing that you have a dead police officer, which, there's no rule that says you work harder when there's a police officer death, but let's not be naive. Cops work, nothing stops them that when one of their own goes down. At a minimum, how do you not look at each other if you're running that? And I guess this goes back to Tully, right? Ultimately, to say, guys, I need you to come back out in daylight. And if we have to go with 2 levels or more, whatever it is, where the hell is the taillight? And it makes no sense. And when they found the first piece, when Berkowitz, found the piece, which is ridiculous as well, how did they not on that day say, oh my God, the CERT team missed something, let's go back? They didn't do it. And
Mark, I'll piggyback on my experience, and this may help you, Maz, with part of response to your question. The times that I've worked with the CERT team, we were always briefed. We had a roll call, we were briefed, and we were told, this is what we're looking for. So you're not just out there on a whim,
right,
stumbling across whatever debris might be on the front lawn of this residence. You're told, we're looking for this possible evidence, or this debris, this type of material is in the scope of the search.
And this is why I always thought that, and again, they didn't have the time to do this necessarily, that if the defense emphasizes ARCA first, and you get basically expert testimony saying it's not a car accident, not to this level, and it would not shatter. Okay. You're not getting that kind of glass from that kind of impact, leads you to the next obvious thing, and Todd's adding to this, which is if the car accident or an impact of a 20-mile-an-hour car in reverse hitting a man could not do that, but yet, as a factual statement that they're telling you there were 40-something pieces of shattered glass there, the obvious question is, how did it get there? And the obvious answer becomes unnaturally. And if it's unnaturally, that means it's a human. And if it's a human, then you say, well, who might do that? And now welcome to the world of Michael Proctor and Yuri Buchanan and everything else with them and their ridiculous testimony. And you go back and forth and back to the Sally Port. And all of a sudden, the so-called conspiracy theory doesn't sound anything like a conspiracy theory, because the first piece of the puzzle is scientific engineering evidence that this is not a natural act.
They were prepared to go with the cocktail glass originally, I think, is the reason for justifying why John O'Keefe had the wounds on his arms. It was then when they found out that the taillight had been slightly cracked when Karen had backed out of John O'Keefe's parking lot and into his vehicle, where they basically caught wind of it through an individual I won't name, that probably tipped them off about it, that they probably came up with this idea to compromise the taillight through shattering it and spreading it all over the place. And how long before they actually came up with that particular plot to go with, I don't know, but it seemed to me that that was their original case. And someone once said, well, why go with the taillight over the cocktail glass? Well, when you look at the damage to his arm, first of all, it's clearly dog bites and teeth marks, just to get that out of the way. But second of all, they needed a bigger story. The cocktail glass doing that kind of damage to their arm maybe isn't believable to someone that doesn't see that it's actually a dog wound. But, maybe going with the taillight, I think they kind of thought, well, between this, what do we go with? Oh, let's go with the taillight here. Let's start cracking it. And I think that's why you see the story constantly evolve throughout the days afterwards, where you get a chief of police in the town of Canton who's driving down the street and he's got better vision than, Superman.
That he can't see at night.
Right, can't see at night, but he can see taillight. What's even more alarming to me is that the size of the taillight only gets bigger as the days go on. They were unable to find this taillight when they were there with their leaf blowers and all that stuff days before. It just reeks of absolutely. Well, it just reeks of making you want to raise your eyebrows at how shocking it is.
There are red flags to follow up on what you're saying, Mazza, about the police action, or actually lack of action on top of everything else, that to me is just conclusive that something is afoot here. And some of it's very simple. I mean, you go back to, they were gung-ho on this was a car accident with a shattered taillight, and you're never going to be able to get a rational explanation how any trained homicide detective, upon coming to the vehicle, which, by the way, was not concealed, it was staring them right in the face. It was, back end out in her parents' driveway. It's right there. I mean, it's literally staring at you, and you never do something like take out this little device that everyone in the world has and that every police officer has, and just take a picture of the taillight. You'll have the metadata. It'll have the time and date. And you know what? If that thing is destroyed, then she may be cooked, and maybe rightfully so. But they don't do that. And there's no explanation for that. There never could be an explanation. But there are other things too. And I'm curious to get Todd's opinion on this. When you heard the testimony, and this was cringe. And I think it was Tully with Alan Jackson going over with him what you perceived and why you never even thought it was worth knocking on the door. And I'm not talking about probable cause to get warrants. That's a whole nother conversation. But I'm saying you see it's 18 degrees out. There is a grown, well-groomed man lying in the middle of the lawn, or now turning into snow, wearing inappropriate clothes for the weather and being outside, with one shoe, with a cocktail glass on a Boston cop's yard. And you knew at that time who he was. You knew who Brian Albert was. You knew that they had been together at the bars and had planned to come over to the house. And it never occurred to you for any reason to even knock on the door to determine if they knew what had, not because they're suspects, but like, did he come in? How about this? Was he drunk? Was he holding a glass? Do you know why he has one shoe on? Did you hear anything? And his response was none of it, none of it, none of it. And then ultimately, the most ridiculous thing, maybe the most ridiculous testimony in the whole trial was, he's like, you know, I wear shorts year round. So guy lying on the lawn in a blizzard in, you know, a light hoodie was, yeah, whatever.
Happens every day.
I wear shorts year round. So nah, nothing. And this is corruption, because this doesn't make any sense. There's no good explanation for this. And these are not dumb people. And you can't dismiss that fact. These are not morons. Okay. And so they don't get the benefit of we're just incompetent. Something stinks here. And the evidence to that appears to be pretty strong. And then, you know, you're hearing also from an experienced investigator tonight telling you very diplomatically from that same agency that no protocol was followed here and none of this makes any sense. And that's troubling.
Mark, I can tell you that when you respond, we'll call it an incident. We don't know if it's
Right.
criminal act yet, right? We'll say it's an incident. Your job as an investigator is you're a fact finder. Now, if your facts start to paint the picture of criminality, it's okay to like someone for that potential crime, but it doesn't stop you from pursuing the facts and the truth. Because when you pursue the facts and the truth, it'll most likely move you away from that original person that you're suspecting of the crime. That's the role of the investigator, is to follow that fact pattern, which starts with interviewing people, occupants of the home or the homeowners.
Can you imagine? I mean, and Todd, you'll probably laugh at this. And if you work with cops your whole life, like I have, on both sides of this, cops are the most inherently suspicious people in the world. Everything's an angle. I mean, if you do anything, they're thinking, well, is he doing this? That's just the way, that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to be inherently suspicious. It doesn't mean they arrest you or do anything. They think, though. They're always thinking and wondering and curious. Except here, not a single cop had any interest in anything other than it had to be a car accident because he had one shoe and there's a cocktail glass and, you know, Jennifer McCabe said something. And I mean, you heard it from Tully, you heard it from Buchanan, you certainly heard it from Proctor, and you may have heard it from others. I don't even remember. Well, Canton guys, certainly. None of them had any even just interest to say, does anybody know what happened to this man? Was he drunk? Was he despondent? Was he saying anything? Was he arguing with anyone? Did you hear him on the phone? These are like the most obvious questions that any good police officer would ask. And to a man and woman, none of these did. And it makes no sense.
One of the things that we did in investigations in the fire marshal's office, and also when I was doing accident reconstruction, is you reverse engineer it. You try to figure out all the factors in reverse to get you to land on something that's plausible to help you discover what the potential angle or the potential motive could have been.
Now you just opened the can of worms, because you just said accident reconstruction and you come from the Massachusetts State Police. So I'll do it. Somebody has to ask. How is, and bless his heart, whether he's a nice guy or not, how does anyone in that agency seriously offer him as an expert and allow that to happen? Because that was the most embarrassing testimony I think I've ever witnessed in 26 years.
Mark, great question. Again, I go back to my time in the fire marshal's office. I was there for 2 years. My first year, I went to over 100 different fires. Some of them were dumpster fires. Some of them were commercial 7 to 8 figure loss.
When you say dumpster, do you mean figuratively or literally or both?
Literally.
That was my question as well. I had that question as well in my head. I was
literally back of the 7-Eleven, and then the dumpster's on fire. Yeah. Nothing sexy, nothing glorious about it. But again, my point is, I went to a range. Those 100 fires created a range of different investigations, and you know, I would have considered myself, even with a year in 100 investigations under my belt, I'm an end user. I'm not an expert. We had a guy in the unit that actually went to school for his PhD in fire science. He testified in front of grand jury on underage interrogating, I believe, an arsonist that was underage. He's the expert. He's the person that can stand in front of judge and jury and talk shop and take you into places that you can never imagine. And again, God bless Trooper Paul, but for the Commonwealth to pick him as their expert, he should have been required to test his theory, because the only thing worse than his testimony was his theory.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, obviously he's going to have to live with that, and it's just whatever. But the DA, and you can say whether it's Morrissey or Lally, however you down the chain of command you want to go, what prosecutor, knowing there's going to be these ARCA guys after the TUI materials were disclosed, thought it was a good idea to say, it's okay, we'll just do this? I mean, if you're okay doing that as a prosecutor, you need to reevaluate your career choices, because the idea that could ever be credible in the face of what the actual scientific evidence was, that was just, it speaks more, I think, to the DA's office than it even does to Trooper Paul. I don't think if there is a retrial, even these people would even attempt to use him. And to me, if they can't get a real expert with science degrees and who are going to take on the ARCA guys, which probably won't happen, because I think science is science. I don't think anything they were saying is controversial to the eggheads who do that for a living, but who knows? I don't know how they can proceed if they don't get that, because at a retrial, the defense is going to be much more prepared to deal with the ARCA guys. They're going to be able to prep them that they weren't able to do the first time, and they're going to know what the cross-examination is. They're probably going to ask them all this stuff, and they're going to be that much more compelling the second time around, and they're going to be able to sum up better on it. And to me, that's one of the main reasons why it's destined not to be retried. I just can't see how they're going to do this.
I got a question that came in, a follow-up about the CERT team. They want to know, is the CERT team usually done for evidence or for people?
Both. The MSP CERT team is responsible for crowd control. They're also activated in the event of a search. So typically there has been some crime. There's been a crime scene. The crime scene's may have been lifted or not been lifted, but either way, the CERT team are trained as investigators. They have patterns, search patterns. They do searches through woods, densely thick woods, with water tables. That's why I have so much respect for them, because they search for evidence in the worst of conditions. So if you have a front yard, even with snow, I know their capabilities. And I'm going to go back to crash collision evidence. That debris field is going to be at point of collision. If she hit him with the vehicle and created a debris field from that tail lens of that plastic, it should have all been right there at point of impact.
Yes.
You mean not behind the fire hydrant 30 feet away?
Correct. Yeah.
Correct.
God.
Yeah.
We got another question on the CERT team. Todd, what are your thoughts on the testimony of the CERT supervisor not being able to give the roster of search participants, where they were only 7 of them, state and local?
Yeah, I can't speak to that. And again, it comes back to the mystery as to, the supervisor of the CERT team testified, but then when the jury asked for, and Mark, maybe you can speak to this, when the jury asked for the information from the CERT search, it was unavailable to them. Would the Judge Canoni just not allow that search in as evidence?
She wasn't going to allow the documentation to exist, but I think it did not exist literally, right? As my understanding. But so she just told them you can't have it. But I don't think it existed. There was no document, which is also stunning to me. There's just, again, the protocol, and this may also reflect on, why the state police needs change. How do you not document? You're searching for evidence in a potential homicide, it has to be reasonable to these people that there could be court proceedings at some point, and they could be civil. It doesn't even have to be someone who gets arrested in a crime. How do you not document any of this? I mean, this is lunacy.
Yeah.
In fact, wasn't the testimony that in addition to the state police, there were a couple of other guys there, whatever the hell that means, you know, whoever other guys are, but there's no documentation. So does other guys mean Brian Albert, Canton Police, Santa Claus? I mean, we don't even know what that means.
Yeah. The recused agency and its members, which got Albert in hot seat as well, setting up interviews.
Yeah. We got another question that came in. It's about the Alberts not coming out of the house. How believable do you think that is?
Zero.
To Todd.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. My exact answer.
There we go. He answered it. He was right.
Yeah, I hear a car going by backfiring in front of my residence, and we live in a very quiet street. I'm that little old person sticking my eyeballs out the window. I just can't understand how you have a Boston police officer who you know, first of all, and is he just hanging out in your property because it's what you do in January in the middle of a snowstorm? It's suspect all the way around.
Plus, Jen McCabe walked up to the door and knocked on the door that night. So, you know, that's something that should be noted, is that there was someone, you know, she knocked on the door. The homeowners were there. It's hard to believe that the dog, which may or may not have even been there, some people theorize the dog might have been gone by that point, would have been barking if he had been in the house. She knocked on the door. There's noise outside. There's lights flashing all over the place. There's more than enough reasons to suggest that anybody in that house would have been woken up.
You know, something else I'm thinking about, when I've testified as an expert witness in use of force cases, it doesn't matter what the plaintiff says. It doesn't matter. I'm saying that facetiously. It does matter what both plaintiff and defendant say. But my point is that you wait for the medical evidence. The medical evidence tells an unbiased story about whatever injuries are sustained. And that medical history, when it came back by the state's medical examiner, could not conclusively say that a vehicle hit John O'Keefe and was cause of death, right? So then you add in the other canine expert, you add in the other medical expert. It's just the evidence. They just punched so many holes in the prosecution's case.
There was an ocean of, I mean, whether you think she's innocent or not, the reasonable doubt is as wide as the ocean. I mean, that's why, to me, the result is stunning. To me, I can't even begin to understand how this is anyone seriously. Now, we don't know what's going on in the room, how they perceive things, obviously, but as an exercise in, you know, a trial autopsy, this is just an open and shut, not guilty.
Got a comment for Attorney Bederow. When you use the term eggheads in this trial, it may confuse the audience, given most of the MSP testifiers resembled eggs. Their heads resembled.
All right.
Eggs.
Well,
I'm jump in there, Mark. I'm proud of my hairstyle.
I'm sorry,
okay,
Todd.
you know, that's funny, but we all know eggheads means, you know, science nerdy, and I meant the ARCA guys, just in terms of being, you know, literally rocket scientists or something similar.
Suddenly the song "I Am the Eggman" is now on my
I started thinking about the cone heads. Remember the cone
oh,
heads?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Here's a good comment. Again, LT33. Love him. He keeps coming back. He says there are outstanding reconstructionists with the Mass State Police. They picked him on purpose. He was expendable. That's on Mass State Police supervisor. It's awful. Any comments? I'll start with Todd first, and then we'll go to Mark and Mazza.
Just a bad choice to call him out as the Commonwealth's expert. His testimony was completely flustered. He could not properly articulate his theory. His theory didn't even make sense to a layperson. Here's the other thing. You have jurors that don't have the level of expertise. He couldn't even craft a narrative in order for them to comprehend what his theory was. And then again, scientifically, unlike the other accident reconstructionists that Jackson and Yannetti brought forward, he didn't test his theory.
So I agree with everything the comment said and everything Todd said, but then I go to the next level, which is, who do you blame? And the answer is the DA, because what a professional prosecutor does is when they get this testimonial garbage, and I don't mean get it on the stand, but I mean, this is, you talk to the witness, this is what they're telling you. You pick up the phone and you call a high-ranking person at the state police and say, are you kidding me? Like, this is a joke. And do you not have an expert? If this is your so-called expert, then it raises other problems. I mean, ultimately, whether the state police served him up to be, the expert patsy, fine, that's a problem. But how did it clear the DA's hurdle? I mean, what are they doing? They're the ones who called him as a witness. They're the ones who argued that he was, telling a credible story. They're the ones who knew what the ARCA people were saying. Did they even present the ARCA findings to Trooper Paul? Probably not. I mean, there's a lot of blame to go around on everyone, but ultimately the DA is in charge of the prosecution's case, and they called him as a witness. So shame on them, primarily.
Mark, I'll add one of the luxuries of Reconstruction. It's not 100% necessary to have a crime scene established.
Right.
You can continue your analysis without an established sterile crime scene.
Yep.
So that's something they could have gotten right.
They had time.
They could have done any number of things. He did nothing other than just, it feels like they told him what to say, and maybe the comment is right from LT33. They gave him a script and said, just say this. And maybe that's why he was so nervous. I don't know. But it was ridiculous either way. But ultimately, I mean, the prosecutor is supposed to be concerned with their credibility first and foremost, because if the jury doesn't find you credible, they're not going to believe anything you say. This is why we always joke about calling them zombies. I can't fathom looking jurors in the eyes and saying, this guy has got the story of what happened to John O'Keefe. This is the real stuff. You should believe this. I mean, that's just embarrassing. It takes a special skill to be able to sell that with a straight face.
Yeah, I think the reason why this man was selected, in my personal opinion, was because any Reconstructionist with any level of talent and ability would have concluded what the ARCA experts concluded. And the only way to get around that is to select someone that either doesn't know what he's doing or someone that's basically in their back pocket.
Well, I have a specific recollection, and if I'm butchering the transcript again, someone will tell me, but I remember this because I was there. When they were doing the offer of proof, if you will, on Trooper Paul. So there was no jury in the room. So this was that day. I believe he was asked if he really understood kinetics, which is just, the science of the human body's movement and how you would go around. And his testimony, I think, kind of was like, not really. Well, then how the hell are you testifying about how a human body was in position and getting hit and moving and ending? And that's exactly what kinetics is. And he's saying, I don't know, but it had to be this because the crime scene told me, and what else could it be? And it was just.
And all that was a sideswipe.
That
was off a sideswipe. And well, we'll just leave it there.
Yeah, right. He wasn't. Todd, I don't know in your experience if you've ever heard about anyone being hit by a moving vehicle in reverse and they spin around like a figure skater doing a triple spin in midair. I've never heard of this stuff in my life. I've never seen it on any YouTube video or anything that I've ever seen in my life. And have any kind of theory suggesting that, it was completely outrageous.
I can tell you that I've responded firsthand, not secondary, not backup, firsthand, my call, where bodies have been ejected from vehicles from hitting either another vehicle or a fixed object, and they didn't go 30 feet.
Yeah.
There you go.
I feel at this point with Trooper Paul, we're doing like, you know, the Sonny Corleone, where the damage is done and the guy just goes up for good measure and kicks him for no reason other than he can.
Why
I don't
not?
think you're going to see him at the second trial, if there is a second trial.
Let's go to since Uncle Frito is here. Since you made the
there you go.
Good
I know you got to love the timing on that.
Perfect. That whoever put that comment up is brilliant.
Uncle Frito says, why was it necessary to remove the taillight from Karen's car at 5 p.m.? Think about it.
Well, it's got to be there for this. I mean, if you believe this, it's got to be there for the search for them to find taillight pieces, right?
What if you don't believe that? What if you're playing it straight? What if,
Well, it goes back to I'm not sure.
why would they actually have to? I always thought that. Like, why would they do it then?
Well, then you have to go back to the testimony of the Dighton officer who testified that it was cracked, not in disarray. He had no skin in the game. In his testimony was just as matter of fact as our conversation right now. Credible.
He's the quintessentially credible cop. No skin, like you said, no skin in the game, no favorites. I'm just a responding officer. I don't know what it's about. I saw what I saw, and I told them, and it is what it is. Yeah, I mean, so that was, you know, I'm a little surprised they didn't cross-examine him. I mean, the testimony was favorable, but you really could have locked him in and dragged the point out even more. That was a little surprising to me. Not that you have to cross-examine every witness, you don't, but I thought there was probably more to extract from him.
Excellent. There's another question for Todd. He said, Ryan asked, within the Mass State Police, who would typically allocate budget for third-party experts?
We didn't see any, did we?
No.
Here's your answer.
Well said. Well,
Do they ever hire out like that? I mean, is it typical that or do they just use people like Trooper Paul usually?
This would be the DA, I think. Again, this is a criminal investigation being run by the DA's office. I mean, at some point, they're going to make the call as to what are we doing, you know, and what are we getting? And so when there's no third-party experts, I'm blaming the DA. It's their case. I mean, you can't blame the police for not doing anything other than we're here. What do you want us to do? And they do it. I'm talking real police, good police. They do. Once the DA is involved, you know, there is some kind of chain of command in the sense that the DA is going to tell them what we want. And the DA was heavily involved in this case within a day or two, whatever. So I think really you look at Morrissey for this, and, you know, they have the budget. They look at the amount of money they've spent on this case.
Yeah, I mean, they got all kinds of money to spend, even on a second trial. These guys got deep pockets on this for some reason.
Look how much they spent on Mello just alone. 70-something thousand just on him.
$70,000 too much.
Yeah. A lot of questions coming in. Definitely try to get to them all, but I just want to warn everyone it's going to be difficult. Maz, do you have any questions that haven't been asked? Or
yeah, I got maybe two questions. Some of these are just softball questions. They're extremely basic questions, but I think that ultimately the answers to these questions that are still, you know, really easy questions are proving an ultimate point. The first question is, John O'Keefe's body was found on the lawn. And if he had been found, say, 2 feet off the lawn on the road, would a state police officer or local police officer deem it necessary to knock on the door outside the house closest to that body where it was located to ask questions? The second question is Ring doorbell footage. What is the protocol for either state or local police officers to acquire Ring footage or camera footage, not only from the house, 34 Fairview Road, or the house across the street, but neighboring houses up to at least 2 houses each way from the house? And just quickly, I'll say Turtle Boy recently knocked on one of the residents in the town a couple of houses away that was within visibility of that house, 34 Fairview. And the resident had answered that he had not been asked by any police officer to turn over any kind of footage whatsoever.
I would start, Maz, with, you know, it's in the town of Canton. It's Canton's jurisdiction. So the first responding officer most likely would have been from Canton PD. Had it been a state trooper, lived in the neighborhood on the way home, cutting through, however, but we'll say just a police officer in general, absolutely, whether it's 1 foot, 2 feet over or in any direction, you're a fact finder. You've got to be able to find out. And I'm knocking not just on the resident of where the body's found. I'm knocking on every other door in eyesight that I can, coordinate off, triangulate, however you want to measure it off. But anyone that's got sight lines to that property, I'm banging on their door. As far as a Ring doorbell, you can ask, and if someone gives it to you, that's one thing. But typically, they would need a warrant in order to secure that. But some people, I'm sure, are, hey, take it. I've got nothing to hide, and that's permissible.
Excellent. Todd, I got another question for you. You have been somewhat critical, we'll say, of the Mass State Police, even on this show tonight. Have you had any pushback from your former colleagues or anyone in law enforcement for coming on shows like this or other shows?
The answer is 100% no. I've had conversations with my friends my remaining friends on the state police. I've been retired now since 2011, so a lot of time in between my tenure and my retirement. But I can tell you that I love the men and women of the state police. They're solid people. Are there some bad actors? Unfortunately, yes. I've in some of my interviews, I draw a parallel of bad apples to the Larry Nassar trial, right? Sexual misconduct with the Olympians, with the Olympic athletes. You had Sandusky scandal at Penn State, right? For whatever reason, good, bad, or indifferent, when you have a bad apple within the law enforcement ranks, it taints the agency. It taints the agency, not just the individual officer. Fair, unfair, I don't know, but the reality is that the bad apples within law enforcement will taint with the agency. The state police is a fabulous organization. It's got some serious problems right now. And because I'm out here speaking truth to power, should not make me a bad guy, should not make me someone that is rogue, or I'm not pro-cop. I'm very pro-cop. So I just want to put that out there as well. But thank you for asking the question, but I've gotten no negative pushback.
Good to hear. And it's, it means you care about the organization.
Right.
It's obvious that you care. Another question came up for you. Have you heard about, or are you aware of the Sandra Birchmore case?
I've not followed it. So I'm sure, again, if it's connected to some of the players, it's going to become more of a higher profile case, but I haven't followed it.
Definitely. I know, Mark, you're aware of Sandra Birchmore too, right?
Yeah, although not to the level of many others, but I mean, I'm aware of how disturbing it is. I'm certainly aware that the family medical examiner, the very well-known Michael Bodden, who is a regular, or was anyway, in New York City. I mean, he's up there now in age, but I know he classified it as a homicide as opposed to the suicide. I'm certainly aware that Fanning and some of the usual suspects from Canton are allegedly mixed up in that somehow, but still to this point, I don't know enough about it to really say other than what I just said. I don't know what's going on. At some point, I'd be interested to know.
We got a question that came in a couple times about how did Proctor know about Karen Reed's medical conditions so early on? I think we've kind of all speculated on this.
Yeah,
You want to answer it, Attorney Bederow? Who wants to go at this first?
Well, it could be one of two things. It could be he was looking in the phone.
Yeah.
Or it could also be she got arrested. And when you get arrested, cops talk to you. They take pedigree information. They'll even ask you, do you have any medical conditions? Do you need any medication? Do you need to go to the hospital? It may very well be something as simple as Karen Reed trusting Michael Proctor not to be a dirtbag by reveal. And I don't know if this is the case, by the way, but simply saying, I have a medical condition and I need this or that. And he, in just an incredible breach of decency and trust, just took that and ran with it. Or it could be he was snooping around. It could be any other basis. I don't know.
Could also be, I think Jennifer McCabe said something.
That could be. Not sure why she would do that. But
Well, she's done a lot of things, right, that you wouldn't imagine. we
I
wouldn't
don't
have-
know. I mean, I don't know why. Again, we're speculating, but
Of
why
course.
McGee would be telling people.
Right.
That certainly doesn't speak very highly of her character, obviously, but that's not exactly a news flash either.
Mhm. I gotta get going, guys. Thank you for having me on, and have a great night. I gotta roll for the evening, so I got a class to attend.
Well, you got some karate to go to?
That's exactly right.
You
bet.
you got to give us a little karate chop first.
Oh yeah,
What do you do?
yeah.
Or at least give us
There
the.
you go.
There you go.
Just knocked my mic over there. Hey, the microphone got taken out, so the move was
Too much
effective.
grab acid going on over
That's
here.
exactly right.
I got
that's
you going,
exactly right.
Maz.
Yeah, exactly.
Next time we gotta have a wrestle off versus a wax on, like your
Right.
You're just gonna win because of size, though. I mean,
Right. Yeah, exactly.
too much of a big man.
But you're not in my weight class, Mike. So
Yeah, I've taken down big men, but
you tried to take
they
down
didn't
me
know
the
what they
first
were
time we
doing.
met.
They didn't know what they were doing. You're big and you know what you're doing, and then I'm
Right.
done. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. All right,
Thank
guys,
you,
have a good
Maz.
night.
Have a great night.
Yeah. Take care. All right. Free
Take
Karen
care.
Reed.
Take care.
So Maz is out. I guess we've been here a while. I've kept Todd here for an hour and a half already. Let's go with Attorney Bederow, because I want to kind of get your final thoughts. But we also have Friday upcoming. We're hopefully going to have you back on the show Friday night as well, right?
Sure.
What do you think about Friday? And what are your final thoughts?
I don't know what's going to happen. You know, the developments from the last week are interesting in the sense that all sides agree to some extent that there are jurors who have said that we acquitted. Now that's not real evidence. And, you know, I think people have unrealistic expectations about what ought to happen on Friday. Like, I would not suggest that the court should credit all that and say, that's it, I'm entering judgments of acquittal. You ought to take evidence. You ought to have a hearing. You ought to bring in the jurors, figure out how you're going to do it so that they don't get doxxed or get them, you know, all the stuff that everyone's worried about. But I think you need to know a number of questions. Did they reach unanimous verdicts? And if so, why wasn't that conveyed properly? What is the reasoning for that? Are their statements credible? I think the DA, if they were, you know, being honest brokers about this, would want to know who contacted who, although the jurors are all saying we contacted first. They have a right to ask all that. And then once the evidence is in, you know, you make the legal arguments. If they want to argue with a straight face that the defense waived the right to be heard on this in the face of all the jurors saying, but we acquitted her. I mean, that's an argument. That's politically suicide, I believe. But they can certainly make that argument if they want. But what is the judge going to do? She's in a much tougher position now than she was when this first came up, because all the evidence that is rolling in is supporting what the defense is saying. None of it has yet to contradict it. Literally, there hasn't been a single piece of evidence that this isn't the case. But if I were the judge, I would be looking and frowning at the DA saying there's a much easier way out of this mess, which is forget the law literally for a moment. Practically speaking, she was acquitted. And even if you want to fight that, they're sending you a very strong message. Your case, your murder case anyway, stinks. So there's another solution here where we can avoid all of this mess, which is, why don't you people step up to the plate and just say, we're not going forward on the murder charge. That would be the easiest way. And that would be the politically smart way for the DA, because they would also look credible, which is not their specialty, as you know, in terms of, you know, usually if you're supposed to go left, they go right and vice versa. That would be the smart move, to just come and say, we're going to retry a manslaughter case. That would buy them a lot of time. It would skip all this stuff. And because they've already lost, even if they win this legal issue, they've already lost. Because if you think for a second that as a prosecutor, you're going to come back in January and retry her for murder, where every juror who's going to be sitting on that case is watching the news now, is being subjected and consuming all this media, much more than the first jury even, which was a lot. The whole world knows she was acquitted. And every prospective juror on a panel in the second trial is going to say, why are they trying this woman for murder? This is un-American. She was acquitted. This DA is an idiot. They're not honest. That's not the message you want to be sending. So this is why I say the defense is already playing chess to the DA's checkers. They've already forced their hand. They've already won this issue, whether it's legally or practically. So I wouldn't be too overly concerned about what the judge does on Friday. What I'd be looking for is, does the DA have the wherewithal and common sense smarts to come in and say, Judge, we're going to make this simple. Adjourn it for a manslaughter trial in January. Have a nice day. That's what they should do.
Mike, I would just add that, for a second trial, the burden of proof doesn't change. Karen Reed does not have to prove her innocence. And I think the prosecution is going to have an uphill climb without their main witnesses as the investigators.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you both for being here tonight. Do you have any final thoughts that we haven't touched on? Anything that you wanted to talk about tonight, Todd, that we didn't get to?
No, looking forward to the next invitation. You got a great group of people that sent in their comments, all good questions. And, I think the difference, and again, the credibility of your show is to get people with unique insight. Mark's the best of the best at his craft. And, he's on, every time I look at my YouTube channel, I see Mark's face. And that's for good reason.
Make my mother so proud. Thanks.
Does she watch all the shows?
She's probably watching right now. Please don't comment if you are, though.
Can we say hello to your mom?
You can say hello.
Hello. Is it Mrs. Bederow?
Uh-huh.
Hello, Mrs. Bederow.
But, for both Mark and I, we just call them balls and strikes. It's not about favoritism. It's not about, liking someone, whatever. I've never met Karen Reed. I don't think I ever will. It's about following the facts, being objective, and just part of the criminal justice, being part of the criminal justice system at one point in my career. You have intimate details about how things are structured and how things are processed. And when there's holes in that process, you tend to speak about them and you call them out the way they should be.
Mark's mom has lit up the chat now. Everyone's saying hello to Mrs. Bederow.
So I have one final thought to add. How the hell did Todd not win that mayoral race? Because who is not voting for him? Seriously.
I think I remember that race too, vaguely. Like I'm trying to, did we touch base way back on that? I'm just wondering. I don't know.
No, it was interesting, but I tell you that the incumbent lied. He ended up telling everyone he wanted to finish his projects, and before he was sworn in for his third term, he announced that he was running for sheriff of Bristol County.
And who is he?
Paul Heroux.
Oh, that's right. I had Paul Heroux on the show at one point. I remember that actually.
Yeah, he duped all his supporters.
So you were okay. So he would end up being the incumbent. It's something. What? Yeah, that's very strange. I think I had him on when he ran for what you said. What he ran for sheriff.
Sheriff, yeah. He beat out Hodgson.
Yeah, that was strange. You very interesting. I mean, when you ran against him, was he the incumbent at that point, or was it? Yeah, he was the incumbent.
He had completed 2 terms.
Okay. Wow. And you were a one-time candidate, first-time candidate?
First time, one time.
Yeah, it's always hard to win on the first time out. Unfortunately, it's very hard to win. Gets an incumbent.
I got 2,300 votes. Not bad for a newbie.
Yeah, I bet it was a good experience too to talk to all those people.
It was.
Excellent. So again, your website where people can, especially if they need security consulting work, 508group.com. What kind of, if someone was out there listening, what kind of work do they hit you up for?
Active shooter training, risk assessments, de-escalation training, just helping organizations secure I'm a business to business. I don't do business to consumer, business to business consulting work, and helping organizations, nonprofits, for-profits enhance their security posture. Excellent.
So if you need security help and you're a business, you could always contact our great guest tonight, 508group.com. It's pinned at the top of the chat. So I want to make sure I promote that for Todd as well. I want to thank Attorney Bederow. You could also reach out to him if you're in New York or maybe Massachusetts, as he's coming here now. Better at Bederow Law on Twitter, or you can just go betterowlaw.com.
Same thing. It's going to take you to the same place eventually.
There you go. Thank you guys for being here tonight. It's really, we love this. Our audience loves it, and it's really happy that you guys both came tonight.
Yeah,
Todd McGhee and Mark Bederow. Thank you guys so much, and Mazza Media too. Thank you all for being here tonight.
Yep.
Good to see you, Mark. Thank you, Mike.
See you again. Take care.
Excellent, and we'll definitely have you both back. I want to thank you so much again. Have a great night, guys.
Take care.
Thank you.
And we're the Young Jurks. My name is Mike Crawford. I want to thank everyone who's been listening and watching tonight. We had some donations come in. I want to thank Margaret Carmichael, who gave us a donation of $10 the other night. And she said, thank you for supporting Karen Reed and Aiden Carney. I didn't get to read that the other night, so I'm reading it now. Thank you so much, Margaret. On Venmo, we had a great donation come in tonight. Pretty wild. Thank you so much, everyone who's been supporting the show. We had a bunch of super chats tonight. On Venmo, Tiffany sent $50. She said, you're producing a great show. Thank you. Thank you so much, Tiffany. That's a great donation. Very generous of you to send $50. Laurie also sent $10 tonight. She said, why did each of the cops' pieces match up? Oh, that's a good question. It's almost like it was planned that way, right? Thank you so much for those donations to Venmo and the Cash App tonight. I also want to thank all the super chats. We tried to ask every one of them, but at one point it started getting crazy. At a certain point. Thank you so much. I hope I got them all up there tonight. Tracy has a theory that I'm just going to flash on the screen. It's what a lot of people think is true. Who knows? We don't know. Thank you, Tracy, for the super chat donation tonight. I want to thank you all. I'm just throwing a few up there, just making sure we got them up there. We did ask that question tonight. Thank you so much, Gina, for asking it. We did ask this question tonight. Thank you so much, Romy, for the donation. Standing Stone 1776. Thank you for the donation tonight. Buzzing for Truth. Thank you for the super chat. I really appreciate all the super chats that are coming in. LT33. Thank you for the great questions tonight. I want to thank Serenity RPH, Sean G. I think I got them all up. Thank you so much, everybody. I want to thank Gene from Dorchester for making a super chat tonight. Great to see you on the super chat. We'll be back again Friday night. I think it's going to be 7 p.m. with Bederow and Mazza Media. I don't think we've nailed down the time yet, but I think 7 p.m. is probably what it will be. Check back. Friday night show. We'll be broadcasting Karen Reed live from court on Friday, 2 p.m., and then doing a live show that night, Friday night. I got to take tomorrow night off. And Saturday, I'm going to be a guest on another show. We may be broadcasting it on our channel as well. Just check our channel. Make sure you're subscribing. If you haven't, like, follow, subscribe, share it. Thank you, everybody who was here tonight watching, sending all the great questions and comments. Sorry I couldn't get to them all. There were so many. I'm still scrolling through them. You guys are amazing. Still 3,100 of you watching right now. Make sure you hit that button on the way out. I want to thank our moderators. Jen O. Thank you so much, Jen. I want to thank Stephanie. I want to thank MJ and Miss Shorty. Thank you so much for our moderators who are always in the chat. Thank you, ladies, so much. There's Miss Shorty right there. Thank you, Miss Shorty. Thank you, Jen O. I see you there as well. We got a good crew. We got a little private chat too. I like checking it. I don't always get to read it at all times. Sometimes my moderators get mad when they can't reach me during a live show when something's going wrong. So I just love these ladies because they stick with me, even though I can be a pain in the butt. Thank you so much for helping and supporting our show. Have a great night, everyone. We'll see you on Friday morning from court, 2 p.m.